Hi, I'm Lindy. Welcome to the studio. I'm just going to get painting.
So here we are starting out. When I start a painting, pastel painting, I get out my reference photo, tape it to a board and tape a piece of sanded paper to the board. Here I am just starting the sky after I've sketched in the basic shapes and outlines. I'll start with blue, a very pale blue up in the top of the sky, and then I'll follow up with some paler pinks down in the midsection of the sky and some pale yellows at the bottom of the sky. At this point, I'm not pushing them into the paper very hard. I'm just laying it on nice and soft and gently, varying the strokes so they go one side to the other, and keeping on layering that in. So more of the blue at the top, just rubbing it down and over to cover the other layers as well. You end up with this nice shine through of the paler, lighter yellows and warmer pinks there. Blending it in now with the side of my finger, pushing it into the sanded paper, the gritty paper there. That gives a nice smooth underlay and covers up some of that deep red sienna coloured paper, which I want to use for the rocks and the wet sand, but not so much for the sky. So just giving it another coat over now because I've smoothed it all in. I now want to add some more of the looser pastel over the top in all those shades that I put in before. So back in with the pink and back in with some more of that yellow and blues again at the top there. So my aim is to get a nice smooth sky, but with some colour sparkle from the pinks and the yellows that I've put in. So I'm using those deep dark colours now, just to get the shadows in there behind the beach. And they're going to be deep blues, very dark blues, dark greens, dark browns, and some purples as well. I'll just follow around the headland there, just putting in where the deepest, darkest shadows are in a very abstract way, just moving my hand with the pastel back and forth, popping in basic shapes where the shadows are going to be. I want to use a lot of colours other than green for this, just to give the vinyl painting a bit more excitement and interest. I don't want to just use a dark green for those shadows, so there'll be deep purples, deep browns, deep blues, and probably, to be honest, not any greens at all in this part of the painting. I just make some little jabby marks at the top there into the sky, because that's going to be where the tops of the gum trees are, and you can see that there's a little bit of the blue sky showing through there. I'll just keep working this area until I'm happy that I've got enough of a base there for the shadows. This is a really important part of the painting because it's going to set the deepest values, the deepest tones in the painting, and that will help me as I continue on judging the tones against those deep dark shadows to make sure that I've got the painting tonally correct. Already I've got a really nice contrast here going between the sky and the trees there, very pale yellowy colour at the base of the sky, and the really dark, deep blues of the shadows in the foliage there. Now I'm going to go back into that foliage along the headland there with some lighter colours, just for the sunlit side of those trees. And it's important when you're painting a painting with a lot of light and shadow in it to be consistent about where the light's coming from, what direction the sun's shining in, where you're going to get the highlights. So now I'm just choosing the way the sun's coming through. It's coming from behind those deep dark trees over there, from that general direction, and shining through onto the headland there. And just modelling those trees a little bit with some more darker colours in there, just to help me to get that three-dimensional shape of the headland and the trees as the sun hits them on one side. And I think you'll find later on this painting that I made the incorrect choice here and I've modelled them on the wrong side, and I'll go back and fix that later on, so watch out for that as we come back to it. I've added in some very dark shadow at the base of those trees to the back of the beach there, and that will help to delineate the sunlit part of the beach or the whiter sand in shadow later on. There I go, just adding a bit more of the lighter, brighter colours onto the headland trees. I don't always work a painting in sections like this. Often I'll use colours from the headland down in the rocks. If I'm doing more of a landscape than a seascape, I'll add colours from the trees into the grasses and the other bits of bushes around. If it's a stormy day, some of those colours might even go into the clouds. So I will normally work the painting all over as I go, but I wanted to split this one up into sections. Here you can see I'm just adding the little touch of sunlight along the beach at the base of that far headland there, and you can already see the great contrast between the very light of the water and the beach there against the base of the trees. I'm adding in some very pale blue, similar to the colour in the sky, a little bit darker, just going through there for the water as it comes in there. I've left a little gap because I'm going to add in some reflections there. So in with the first base layer of the water, I've got some more squiggly lines at the front here as the water is going to make little ripples around the rocks that I'll be putting in there. This is just a very light coating. I'm not pressing hard into the paper. I'm just scrumbling it across the top of the paper so that I can leave room later to work in more colours and more layers. And already you can see that the sea's taking shape. I'm putting in some of those dark, deep shadows now in the reflection area there, and I'll add in some of the lighter colours as well. And I'm just making downward strokes because the reflections in the water they'll be vertical, not horizontal. And at this time too, I just go back and work a little bit more into the headland there, just to make sure I'm connecting the colours in the headland with their reflection down in the sea there. Back in with some more reflection colours, add a little bit more to the headland. And I'll keep doing this throughout the rest of the painting. As I'm working on one area, I'll go back and pop some of that colour into another area just to help unify it together. Of course, the great thing with pastel painting is there's so many beautiful papers out there with fantastic colours already on them as a backing that you use that background colour as a uniting force for the whole painting, and that's what I've done here. I've chosen that sienna background, which is picking up a really reddy colour in the rocks and around the edge of the beach that's in the original photo. So just giving that reflection a little up and down movement with my finger as I smooth it in, because reflections in water are much smoother than the trees there, and a little smooth across, not so much that they appear horizontal marks, but just to give it that blurry look that you get in reflections, that softer look rather than the sharper look of the trees that I've got up there. Just rubbing a little bit more of that water pastel in there, so a little bit of the blue going in over the top of the lighter blue that I put in earlier, and just taking a little bit into the reflections there, just to give you that sense of water rippling over the reflections. Now I'm going in around the beach, edge of the beach there, where the sand's got wet and you get that darker colour than the sand itself, and some more reflections of shadows there. That's where the sun isn't reaching the water so much. It's behind those dark trees, and they're stopping the sun getting right onto that water there. So it's no longer really bright blue as it is further out of the shadows. It's got a deeper, darker tone, and because it's the wet sand, it's also getting some reflections from the far headland there. So in with the deep darks there, and that just gives something nice to play off against the lights of the water. You can see again I'm going back into that headland, and I'll keep doing this throughout the painting. Back I go, add a little bit more into the reflections, And when you want the edge of the sand, the edge of the beach to look wet, put the dark colours next to the light colours, smooth them out, give them that shiny, smooth, wet feeling, and you'll get that by smoothing it out. And then as you come out into the water, as I come out into the water, I'll start scrumbling again, so that you've got that sense of the light hitting the water, and there's little ridges and hollows in the water, little wavelets. And so the blue isn't uniform, it's not even, it's got some highlights and lowlights where the light's hitting the water as it moves. Into the beach now, this is a really fun part of the painting. I'm putting in little strips of really light pink there on the sand where the sun's making it through that tightly packed forest of gum trees there. So there'll be a whole series of these little strips going down the beach, describing the form of the beach, the little bit of the slope of the beach, the angle of the beach, and then we'll add some shadows in between them. So I've put in the lighter pinks now. I'm adding in some purples, deeper purples. It's still much lighter than the background trees there because the sand is very light coloured, and it will just be a bit darker where the shadows go, but still not nearly as dark as the very dark vegetation behind it, which started off, before it was in shadow, being much darker tone than the sand of the beach. So you can see on the beach now I'm getting that sense of light and shadow on the beach. I'll keep working that area a little bit, and I'm adding in now some blues over the top of the purple just to give it a little bit of variation in the shadow. You don't want it all to be just the one colour. I'll take that around a little bit to join up the headland. Now I'm starting back in again, and I'm adding a few more colours into that shadowed area of the beach where the beach is meeting the water, and you get that wet strip, that transitional zone. Smoothing it out again. And again, it's all about the contrast between the lighter colours and the darker colours. I'm giving the water a little smooth out now, just to hide some of the sienna colour, and now another lighter colour going on over the top of the darker blue, just to help get some variations in the water. Just a little bit harder going in now with some deeper blues, adding it in there behind the shadow, the reflections. But the water will be lighter in the distance. Just adding in a few deeper tones there. And keeping working through the water as well. Taking a little bit of the blue, a much deeper blue now, into the shadowed area and back out into the main sea there as well, and adding it down here where the water gets a little bit shallower and you see some of the redder colour through the water in around the rocks there. Back in with the lighter blue over the top. The water is just layers and layers of different coloured blues. And now moving down to the rocks. So here we go. I'd already put in some basic design blocks of the darker colours on the rocks to give me a start in that initial sketch, and now I'm putting in the very light areas. So I'm just going in and marking out the lightest areas and edges of the rocks, and already you can see that main rock there, it's come alive. It's nicely three-dimensional because I've got the lightest parts of the rock contrasting against the darkest parts of the rock. I'll keep doing that around here. Some of the forms will be fairly rough at this stage, but I'll be reworking them as I go through. I'll start adding in now some of the mid-tone colours there. And you can see that what I was talking about earlier with the background colour of this paper, it works really well in these rocks. And it helps you put the darks on, the lights on, and already you've got that mid-tone of the reddy sienna colour, which really helps to describe the rocks perfectly there. I knew when I started this painting that the most time-consuming part and the most difficult part for me would be the rocks. For me, rocks have always been a bit of a challenge, and it took me a long time to feel reasonably comfortable with getting them to look like rocks instead of, I don't know, squished hedgehogs or flat cardboard boxes or a pillow with a dirty brown cover. It took a long time to actually make them look like rocks and to feel that when I picked up a pastel and started to draw a rock, that a rock would be what I was drawing. And it's all about looking, so looking at the shapes, looking at the hard edges, the soft edges, where the colours merge softly into each other, where you get a very sharp, hard edge, and these will all help your rocks look more realistic. And these are quite rough rocks, not all nice, round, smooth, discrete shapes. There's a bit of rubble and pebble in amongst it as well, so a little bit more time consuming than the trees or the beach or the water. And they do make up a big part of this painting. A third of the painting are those rocks. And this is where you're going to find the biggest contrast between the lights and the darks. If you look now, you'll notice what I was talking about earlier. On the rocks, I have all the shadow going on the left-hand side, but if you look back at the far headland, I seem to have shadowed some of those trees on the right-hand side. I didn't follow my own rule, which was constantly think about where the sunlight's coming from. The beach is fine, shadows are coming down through there, the rocks are fine, but I'm going to need to go back later and fix that headland and move the shadowed area to the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side. So now I'm just putting a lot more darks in there, and some of these darks will be the same darks that I've used in the trees, the deep purples and blues, with some more browns than I've used in the tree area, and that will help to unify the shadows in the trees and in the rocks as well. Now I'm going back in with a few more highlights. And you can see the rocks are starting to take shape there. Some of them are quite rough at this point, but I'll be refining them as I go. And then I start to put some of the little highlights on the smaller rocks out in the water. And some of this highlight colour will be the very pale yellow I had in the sky and a little bit of the pinky colour that I've got in the beach there. So that all helps to tie the painting together as well. And I'll be constantly going back and forth here, putting in a highlight, knocking it back a little bit with a darker colour, coming back into it again until I feel that the rocks are looking like rocks, that they reflect the overall shapes that I wanted, and there are no glaring problems. I know at the moment that there's a glaring problem in the left-hand corner here that's not looking right at all, but I'll come to that later on. Now I'm popping in some very dark brown colours there over the little pebbly areas, just to give some contrast there, describe the deeper shadows around some of the little pebbles there, and even some little mussels on the rocks. And I'll add a little bit of it to some of the other rocks in shadow out there as well. If you look back at the sky there, you can see, perhaps you can see now the glow that you get from the yellows and the pinks on the edge there of where the trees touch the sky. It makes it much more interesting than just having blues, to get a little bit of that reflected, bouncy light off the landscape into your skies. Now I'm just adding a few more colours in there. I've added a little bit more of mid-tones into the rocks themselves, a few oranges and ochres. These will be a little bit harder as I press on now with the pastel. The first few layers were not so hard, but now I'm wanting to really describe shapes and forms and give some hard edges where the light's catching the rocks. I'm starting to tackle some of the areas that I think are problems now and make the shapes a little bit more believable. And again, you can see I've got a very light colour going in there just to give it a little bit more of a highlight to some of the edgy parts of the rocks. I keep referring back to the photo just to give me an idea. The rocks are not a direct copy of the photo. I've used it as a reference to guide me about the large mass of the rocks and how it fits into the composition, and then I'll just work from there. I'm starting to work a little bit more on that left hand corner now to make it a bit more rock-like. It's just a process in a big mass like this, mass of rocks or other large area that has an overall shape and design, but you need to divide it up into smaller segments, that I just keep working back and forth. I've been really worried about that area I'm working on now, but just adding that little highlight on the top edge of the rock has broken it up really nicely. It looks much more realistic now. I don't want to smooth out too much in the rocks. You really haven't noticed me much using my fingers in here because the rocks are much rougher than the water and the sky and the beach, so I really don't want to be putting my fingers on it very much. Just using the edge of the pastel, side of the pastel, maybe a sharp tip for some of the very sharp edges. And just building up the layers as I go. Yes, I've been worried about that area too, so I'm just breaking that up a little bit and making it a little bit more of a natural shape. Looked a bit like a cow's head there a moment again, but it's now coming together a bit better. Back out into the water again now, just to work some more on those rocks. Popping in some highlights again, just where the sun's catching the edge of the rocks. They help to lead the eye out a little bit too. The composition's got a nice flowing curve shape, but we don't want to go around the curve and straight out the top of the painting there, top edge of the painting. We want to come back, and so the few little rocks in the sea there will help to give us our eye a pathway back into the rocky area at the bottom. So you get up a nice circular flow with a little bit of a deviation in there as you go through the rocky area. I'm going back into those shadowed areas now and fixing my previous mistake, moving some of the shadows so that the direction of shadows is consistent throughout the painting. If we don't have consistent shadows, the viewer's going to come along, look at our painting and know there's something wrong. Even if they can't tell exactly what it is, they'll look at it and know that there's just something a little bit off about it. So always check your shadow direction. Here I'm going to come back now into the rocky area and just put a little bit of foamy wavelets around the rocks there to give a bit of motion to the water. And then back into this little area up here. It's a little gap in the trees where the sun shines really coming through. So I'm just putting in that little bit of brightness up there, a few jabby bits with the tip of the pastel in some brighter yellows, just to show the sun coming through there. And then I'll take a few of those brighter yellows in a moment and put them in other areas, just a touch of them to help. There I go along the headland doing that, just to help tie that part in. And now the thing that's been missing here at the back has been all the tree trunks. So now I'm putting in the gum tree trunks in silvery bluey greys. A few back there on the headland. And these will be the little bits of light in amongst the deep shadows there, which will help to break up the big mass of the trees. Tree trunks are rarely ever straight, so these are all at angles and help you believe that they're trunks. There's not much detail in them at all, just enough to suggest that this mass is made up of individual trees. And you can fairly see that under colour of the painting glowing through now. That was the effect I was after when I chose that as the colour of my paper.
So there we have it. That's how I painted this little pastel packed with drama with all that light and shade that I've put in there. I hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe I'll see you again next time. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for now. Bye for now.